It all started with the kind of silence that screams louder than words. "Put your hands where I can see them," the white officer barked, his voice sharper than the cold steel in his grip. The black FBI agent raised his hands, badge flashing under the flickering street lamp, but the officer's gun remained pointed directly at him. "You don't get to pull that badge out here." The officer spat, eyes burning with contempt. The night air hung thick with tension, a crowd gathering at the intersection where justice seemed to be taking its last breath. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus Reed, the FBI agent with decades of experience, decorated service, and a reputation that could rival any in the Bureau. Here he was, facing down a police officer who saw him not as a federal agent, but as a threat purely because of the color of his skin. Marcus's mind raced back to every training session, every undercover operation, every fight for justice he'd been a part of. None of that mattered now. To this officer, Marcus was a suspect first and an agent second. Or worse, not an agent at all. "Step back, officer," a calm voice ordered from behind the crowd. It was the police chief, a man who had been invited to mediate this escalating mess. The officer lowered his gun fractionally, but didn't lower it completely. Marcus noticed the chief's eyes flat, distant, devoid of concern. "You need to calm down, son," the chief said, addressing the officer. Then, without waiting for any resolution, he turned on his heel and walked away, leaving the agent frozen, the officer still tense, and the crowd buzzing with outrage. The incident spiraled faster than anyone could have imagined. Marcus felt every eye on him as the police chief's dismissal sent a clear message. This was not a priority. The FBI agent's sense of betrayal stung worse than any bullet could. His world had been black and white justice and injustice, but that night, the lines blurred. The system he believed in had cracked, and he was the one left exposed in the fracture. He clenched his fists, the badge in his hand now feeling heavier than ever. The story had just begun. It all started with the kind of silence that screams louder than words. "Put your hands where I can see them," the white officer barked, his voice sharper than the cold steel in his grip. The black FBI agent raised his hands, badge flashing under the flickering street lamp, but the officer's gun remained pointed directly at him. "You don't get to pull that badge out here." The officer spat, eyes burning with contempt. The night air hung thick with tension, a crowd gathering at the intersection where justice seemed to be taking its last breath. Marcus Reed was no stranger to danger. A seasoned FBI agent with a career spanning nearly 15 years, he'd seen his fair share of chaos, corruption, and cold-blooded criminals. But tonight felt different. This was not about catching a suspect or solving a case. This was about something far uglier: the raw, unfiltered venom of racial hatred. He had been investigating a series of cybercrimes linked to a drug cartel, a case that had taken months to unravel. The operation was sensitive, requiring coordination between federal and local law enforcement. Tonight, he was supposed to meet the local police for a joint briefing. Instead, he found himself caught in the crosshairs literally. "Step aside, Reed," the officer said, voice low but trembling with anger. "You think just because you wear that badge, you're untouchable?" Marcus took a slow, steady breath. "I'm here to work with you. There's no need for this." The officer's eyes narrowed. "I know what you really are." A whisper rippled through the crowd, words Marcus couldn't catch, but understood perfectly. A black man wasn't trusted here. He glanced up to the police chief, standing nearby. The man's face was unreadable, his posture indifferent. Marcus's heart sank. The officer tightened his grip on the gun. A cold chill ran down Marcus's spine. "I don't have to explain myself," the officer sneered. "You're the problem, always are." A young woman in the crowd gasped. Some people murmured, others pulled out their phones to film. Marcus slowly reached into his jacket and pulled out his FBI credentials. "Look at this. I'm on your side." The officer laughed bitterly. "That badge doesn't change the color of your skin." Suddenly, the police chief stepped forward, hands raised as if to calm the situation. "Officer, put down the gun," the chief said calmly, but there was no urgency in his voice. "Let's not make a scene." The officer hesitated, then slowly lowered the gun, but kept it pointed just barely away from Marcus. The chief turned and walked away without looking back. That moment was a crack in the foundation Marcus thought he could stand on. Marcus's phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He pulled it out to see a message from his partner, Elena. "Are you okay? News is blowing up." "What happened?" He stared at the screen, then deleted the message. No answers yet. The crowd started to disperse, but a few stayed behind, whispering, watching. Marcus felt a wave of exhaustion hit him, not physical, but something deeper. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound. He looked up at the sky, rain starting to fall gently, washing away the grime of the streets, but not the stain of what had just happened. Inside the precinct, Marcus sat across from Elena, the only person he could fully trust. "I thought the chief would back me," Marcus admitted, voice low. Elena shook her head. "He didn't just ignore you. He ignored the truth." Marcus clenched his fists. "This isn't just about me. It's about all of us who face this every day." Elena reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "Then we fight. Together." The following days turned into a whirlwind of media coverage, protests, and heated debates. The video taken by a bystander went viral, showing the officer pointing a gun at Marcus, the chief turning his back and walking away. In the news interviews, Marcus remained calm but resolute. "This is about systemic racism in law enforcement. It's not just one bad apple, it's a barrel rotting from the inside." But the system pushed back. Internal investigations were slow, bureaucratic. The officer was put on leave but faced no immediate charges. The chief released a statement, vague and dismissive, calling the incident a misunderstanding and urging calm and unity. Marcus felt the weight of isolation, even from colleagues who were too afraid to speak out. At home, late at night, he stared at the badge on his desk, questioning everything he believed in. His daughter, Maya, asked one evening, "Daddy, why do they hate you?" The question broke him. "I don't know, sweetheart," he whispered. "But I promise, I'll keep fighting so that one day, no one has to feel that way." The fight was only beginning. The weeks following that fateful night were a battleground Marcus Reed never anticipated. News cameras circled like vultures. Activists rallied outside the precinct, demanding justice. But inside, things were quiet, too quiet. Marcus sat in his office, watching the news reports paint a fractured picture. Some outlets called the incident an isolated confrontation. Others boldly named it racial profiling on the rise. But for Marcus, it was personal. His inbox flooded with messages from well-meaning colleagues and strangers alike. "Stay strong, brother. We see you. Keep fighting." Yet, amid the support, there was a venomous undercurrent: anonymous threats, hateful comments on social media, whispers from within the department. The FBI launched an internal review, but Marcus felt the wheels of justice turn painfully slow. Every meeting was a reminder of the bureaucratic machinery more interested in protecting its own than uncovering truth. His commanding officer, a seasoned agent named Diane Mitchell, offered quiet but steady support. "You're not alone in this," she said one afternoon over coffee, her voice soft but firm. "I feel like I am," Marcus admitted. "Like I'm fighting ghosts." At home, Maya noticed the change in her father. "He's tired," Elena said, watching Marcus sit by the window for hours, lost in thought. One evening, Maya approached him quietly. "Daddy, why don't you smile like before?" Marcus smiled weakly, pulling her into a hug. "Because sometimes, grown-ups have to carry heavy things," he said. "But your smile is the light I need." Meanwhile, the officer who pointed the gun, Officer Greg Wallace, was slowly becoming a symbol of everything wrong in the system. His lawyer issued statements denying racial bias, calling Marcus a threat who resisted authority. But a leaked internal memo suggested a pattern of complaints against Wallace, complaints that had never been properly addressed. Marcus dug deeper, using his FBI contacts to gather evidence. But the closer he got, the more resistance he met. Anonymous sources warned him to back off. Some lines aren't meant to be crossed. But Marcus wasn't one to back down. One late night in the office, Marcus stared at his computer screen: mails, files, reports piled high. He found it. Video footage from a dash cam showing Wallace aggressively confronting several black civilians over the past year, always escalating to threats or force. This was bigger than one night. He shared the findings with Diane, who frowned deeply. "This could blow the case wide open, but it will make powerful enemies." Marcus nodded. "I'm ready." As the investigation unfolded, pressure mounted. The police chief, Daniel Hayes, began a public campaign to restore the department's image, making superficial promises of reform but refusing to address the real issues. Marcus watched the chief's polished speeches with growing disgust. One afternoon, Marcus was called to a meeting with the chief himself. Hayes sat behind a massive desk, his tone icy. "Agent Reed, I appreciate your service, but this crusade you're on is dangerous. It's dividing the community." Marcus met his gaze steadily. "This isn't a crusade. It's the truth, and it needs to be told." Hayes' eyes narrowed. "Watch your step." Word got out about the meeting. The tension between federal agents and local police grew palpable. At a town hall meeting, Marcus faced a packed room, many skeptical, some hostile. A man stood up, voice loud and accusing. "Why should we believe a federal agent who comes here pointing fingers at our men and women in blue?" Marcus's voice was calm but unwavering. "Because justice isn't about who wears the badge. It's about protecting the rights of every citizen regardless of race or rank." That night, a rock smashed the window of Marcus's car. A message left on the windshield: "Leave town," and Elena held him tightly. "We're not backing down." Marcus swallowed his fear. The FBI opened a formal investigation into the department. Wallace was suspended pending review. The city was divided. Protests erupted, some peaceful, some violent. Marcus found himself at the epicenter of a storm he hadn't asked for but couldn't escape. Then came the breaking point. One evening, Marcus received an anonymous tip. "Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th, midnight." Against better judgment, he went. The warehouse was dark and empty except for a single figure, a former officer turned whistleblower named Rick. Rick's hands shook as he handed Marcus a file. "Here. All the evidence you need: cover-ups, racial profiling, threats. It's all in here." Marcus flipped through pages of reports, recordings, even emails. "This is explosive." Rick nodded. "But they'll come after you. You need protection." Marcus knew he was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The next day, the FBI announced a public hearing. Marcus stood before a panel of officials, the city's eyes on him. He laid out the evidence with clinical precision: the bias, the abuse, the systemic racism. The crowd listened, some shocked, others enraged. The hearing ended with a promise: a full overhaul of the police department. Wallace and several other officers were charged. But Marcus's victory felt hollow. He lost colleagues who distanced themselves, endured late-night threats, and faced a community fractured by years of mistrust. One afternoon, as Marcus walked through a park with Maya, she tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, will it get better?" Marcus looked at the hopeful eyes of his daughter and smiled. "It has to. We're making it better." The months that followed felt like a relentless storm battering Marcus Reed's life from every side. The investigation into Officer Greg Wallace and the corrupt practices within the police department had rocked the city. Headlines blared accusations of systemic racism, cover-ups, and abuse of power. Yet for every step forward, there seemed to be 2 steps back. The police chief, Daniel Hayes, had resigned amid mounting pressure, but the wounds he left behind festered. Many officers remained loyal to the old ways, resistant to change. Marcus faced hostility not just from outside, but from within the ranks he was sworn to protect. At the FBI, Marcus was hailed as a hero by some, a troublemaker by others. He carried the weight of those opinions with a heavy heart. One evening, as he prepared to leave the office, Marcus was approached by Diane Mitchell. "We got a new lead," she said quietly. "There's evidence tying Wallace's actions directly to a drug trafficking ring that's been operating under the radar." Marcus's eyes sharpened. This could finally dismantle the whole network. They worked tirelessly, tracking phone calls, surveillance footage, informant testimonies. The deeper they dug, the clearer the picture became. Wallace wasn't acting alone. He was part of a shadowy alliance between corrupt cops and criminals. But justice was elusive. Court battles dragged on. Legal teams employed every delay tactic possible. Marcus often found himself questioning whether the system he believed in was rigged to protect its own. One night, after a long day of testimony, Marcus returned home to find Maya waiting on the porch. Her eyes were bright with a child's innocence, but there was a new resolve in her voice. "Daddy, you're helping people, right? Like a superhero?" Marcus laughed softly, ruffling her hair. "I'm trying, Maya. I'm trying." The city was changing. Protests had faded, but left an undercurrent of hope. Community programs, police reform workshops, dialogue forums, seeds planted in the soil of struggle. Marcus's story became more than just his own. He was a symbol of resilience, of courage, of the fight for equality. Then came the final trial. The courtroom was packed. Wallace sat with his head down, flanked by lawyers. The prosecution laid out the evidence meticulously. Witnesses testified about years of racial profiling, intimidation, and abuse. Marcus took the stand. He spoke with clarity and conviction. This isn't about one man. It's about a culture that allowed this to happen. We must hold accountable those who betray their duty to protect and serve. After days of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict, guilty on all major charges. Wallace was sentenced to prison. Outside the courthouse, Marcus was met by a crowd, some chanting, some weeping, some simply standing in silence. Elena wrapped her arms around him. "We did it," she whispered. But Marcus knew the real work was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, reforms were implemented. New leadership took over the police department, emphasizing transparency and accountability. Marcus was invited to speak at community events, schools, and law enforcement training sessions. He never forgot that night the gun pointed at him, the chief walking away. It was a reminder that justice was not a guarantee, but a struggle. One afternoon, standing at a memorial for victims of racial violence, Marcus felt Maya tug his hand. "Daddy, can we help more people?" He looked down at her and smiled. "Yes, Maya. Together, we can change the world." The fight against racism, injustice, and prejudice was far from over. But as long as people like Marcus stood up and spoke out, there was hope. Hope that one day, no one would be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And that was worth every battle, every scar, every moment of doubt. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.